For crisis intervention, call 228-1505.
There are reports this morning that Mikhail Gorbachev may be ready for a change of policy in Central America. Michigan went down to the wire last night to pull off a one-point championship victory in overtime. And after the game, some rowdy fans got out of hand in Ann Arbor. This is the CBS Morning News. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charles Osgood.
And I'm John Ferrugia, in for Faith Daniels. It's Tuesday, April 4th, and leading our news this morning, a rumored Gorbachev offer on Central America.
The Soviet leader will address Cuba's National Assembly later today. If Gorbachev has any proposals to announce at the Havana summit, the speech would provide a natural forum to break the news. Juan Vasquez has been listening to the speculation as it grinds out of the rumor mills, and he joins us now. Good morning, Juan.
Good morning, Charles. Gorbachev will give a talk today that is expected to focus on Central America. He may be ready to make important concessions in this critical region, to withdraw or scale back Soviet support for revolution. If that's what he has in mind, he could leave Castro out on a limb.
Last night saw the social highlight of the Communist Summit as Fidel Castro and Mr. and Mrs. Gorbachev greeted hundreds of guests at a gala state reception in the Palace of the Revolution. Castro played the genial host, Gorbachev the proper guest, friendly but reserved. Trying to dispel the notion that there's friction with his Soviet ally, Castro told reporters later that it's all in the family, nothing wrong here. The issue of Cuba's huge debt to the Soviet Union, he was asked. Not a problem, the Cuban president replied. In fact, Soviet spokesman confirmed that the issue never came up in hours of private meetings on the first day, but they added it might crop up today. They pointedly mentioned that Gorbachev had informed Castro of the results of recent Soviet elections, a taboo subject in Cuba. Still, the Soviets said it was all in a friendly atmosphere. For Castro, who has a lot riding on the outcome of this meeting, things have gone more or less well so far. The ceremony, the protocol, the wreath-laying, all on schedule, all as it should be. But today, Cuba and the Soviet Union will sign a treaty that could outline the future relationship between these communist allies. Later, Gorbachev will speak before the National Assembly to deliver what his aides consider a major speech on Latin America.
Charles, the Soviet entourage clearly expects that Gorbachev will make headlines, not only with the speech, but with the treaty as well. The headlines that he expects to make, we haven't been told what he'll say to the National Assembly exactly, but we have been told, take it at face value, we mean it.
Juan, can we tell how the men are getting along on a personal level? Do they seem to like each other or not?
Well, it's all very proper. Castro can't complain about his guest behavior, but there isn't any spark there. Warmth, perhaps, but no enthusiasm. The eagerness that he displayed with President Reagan, for example, hasn't been seen here, not so far anyway.
Thank you, Juan. Juan Vasquez there in Havana. John?
Raisa Gorbachev will tour Old Havana today, the historic center of the capital, while her husband deals with Castro. On her first day in Havana, Mrs. Gorbachev paid a visit to one of the city's many daycare centers. The Cuban children honored their guests by dancing and singing Russian style. Meanwhile, in Washington, President Bush and Egyptian President Mubarak appear to be on common ground today in advance of Israeli Prime Minister Shamir's visit to the White House on Thursday. After conferring with Mubarak yesterday, Mr. Bush said the United States and Egypt agree that Israel should end its occupation of Arab lands and that Israel's borders should be secure.
A new atmosphere must be created where Israelis and Arabs feel each other's willingness to compromise so that both sides can win.
It's understood that Mubarak wants the United States to help restrain Israel, and President Bush wants Egypt to press the PLO for restraint.
It was a wild night in the streets of Ann Arbor, Michigan, where thousands of ecstatic basketball fans went on a rampage following the Wolverines' NCAA championship victory over Seton Hall last night. Ann Arbor bars were jammed with Michigan rooters, and moments after the final buzzer sounded, they flooded into the rain-swept streets, tossing beer bottles, ripping down street signs, even overturning police cars and TV vans. At least 8 people were arrested, 2 were hospitalized, and many minor injuries were reported. As for the game that triggered all of this, it was an overtime nail-biter, and Jim Lampley joins us from Los Angeles with more. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Charles. 3 weeks ago, there were a few observers who would have given Michigan much of a chance to win the NCAA tournament, not because of any lack of talent, but rather because head coach Bill Frieder had left the program for Arizona State. Yet with an interim coach, Steve Fisher, at the helm, the Wolverines managed to claim the national championship last night with a dramatic win over Seton Hall.
The message.
The oil spill from the tanker Exxon Valdez has now forced Alaskan officials to close Prince William Sound's $12 million herring fishery. And New York State police say they expect Captain Joseph Hazelwood to surrender later today on charges that he was drunk when the tanker ran aground. John Blackstone has the latest on efforts to save the ship and Alaska's wildlife.
Most of the remaining oil has been pumped off the Exxon Valdez.
If you're just joining us, here are the top stories. Soviet diplomats in Havana are dropping hints that Mikhail Gorbachev will make a major offer on Central America when he addresses the Cuban National Assembly today. And President Bush, preparing for a visit by Israel's Prime Minister Shamir, says the United States and Egypt agree that Israel should end its occupation of Arab lands.
Mideast sources are telling CBS News that a terrorist coalition is plotting revenge attacks on American targets about 10 days from now on the 3rd anniversary of the U.S. attack on Libya. The threats come from the same group believed responsible for Pan Am 103's bombing. In Washington, relatives of the Pan Am victims gathered. It was the 103rd day after the tragedy, and many complained that effective security measures still have not taken effect.
In Poland, the government and the Solidarity labor movement are continuing their talks today in rare unity on one issue. Both are blaming Poland's communist-led unions for blocking an agreement and threatening the collapse of the roundtable talks. The unions object to a proposed deal between Solidarity and the government that would link wages to future price increases. There's a standoff in Haiti this morning. Rebel soldiers, members of the elite Leopard Battalion, are holding the international airport. Government troops and tanks clashed with the rebels yesterday and killed at least 4 of them. The rebels have blocked roads with burning tires and have ordered people off the streets. They're demanding freedom for their commander, who was jailed after leading Sunday's coup attempt.
The Iran-Contra trial resumes in Washington this morning, and the jury is now hearing from a defense witness who says President Reagan personally selected Oliver North to keep the Contras alive. Linda Tyra reports.
Oliver North's lawyers opened their defense with the most explicit account so far that top government officials authorized North to be the person responsible for the Contras during a congressional ban on U.S. support. Yesterday, Vincent Canestraro, who never revealed his line of work, but who appeared intimately familiar with the CIA, testified President Reagan and CIA Director William Casey made North the point man for the Contras. In Canestraro's words, Mr. Casey said he had discussed it with the President of the United States, and it was agreed with the President that this was how it should be handled. Former Marine Corps Commandant Paul X. Kelly testified that 3 times during North's tenure at the National Security Council, the White House intervened to keep North from being reassigned. General Kelly said CIA Director Casey and UN Ambassador Jeane Kirkpatrick also lobbied him to keep North at the White House. Another defense witness was Ellen Garwood, a wealthy Texas widow and Ronald Reagan booster, who donated more than $2 million to the Contras. Regarding charges that North was present when she was solicited for money by fundraiser Carl Channel, Garwood replied, "Now that's a lie." The defense resumes this morning with more testimony by Vincent Canestraro. It's also hoping at some point to introduce selected videotape testimony by former National Security Advisor John Poindexter, who faces trial later this year. Linda Tyra, CBS News at the federal courthouse in Washington.
United Nations observers in Namibia say that country has been invaded by guerrilla forces from Angola. The attack is said to have begun Saturday, the day Namibia began its transition to independence. The independence agreement had called for an end to those guerrilla attacks.
The Air Force has given its B-1B bomber fleet a clean bill of health and has returned the 97 planes to active status. The fleet was grounded last week when the swing wing on one of the B-1Bs swung too far and punctured a fuel tank. An inspection failed to turn up any similar problems on other planes.
This is Election Day in Chicago, where 3 men are on the ballot to finish the term of Mayor Harold Washington, who died in office. And as Gary Reeves reports, Chicago voters are expected to elect the candidate with a very familiar name.
Frontrunner Richard Daley.
There's a report this morning that former Vice President Spiro Agnew is asking for a $24,000 tax refund from the state of California on money he sent to the state of Maryland to repay kickbacks he took 20 years ago when he was Maryland's governor. Word of the Agnew request is in this morning's Los Angeles Times. It says California officials plan a hearing on the appeal on Thursday. California officials are out this morning with a report that the state's population has gone up a record 662,000 in just 1 year. Most of the increase came from people moving to California rather than new births. And one official says modestly, I guess we just have too much to offer everyone.
A young Soviet chess player who defected to the United States last week now says he'd been planning that move for some time. 14-year-old Gata Kamsky told reporters in New York he and his father made the decision to defect because Soviet chess officials were blocking his advancement by keeping him out of major tournaments. Kamsky and his father are expected to live in a Russian-speaking Brooklyn neighborhood. The America's Cup feud between the San Diego Yacht Club and New Zealand challenger Michael Fay is sailing back into court. Lorraine Kimmel of KFMB TV in San Diego reports on yesterday's decision to file an appeal.
It's become the nautical answer to the feud between the Hatfields and McCoys. Last fall, of course, San Diego won the America's Cup by beating New Zealand in a twin-hulled and far faster sailboat. Last week, 7 months after the race, a New York judge ruled the American boat illegal.
Can you imagine the results of the 1988 Super Bowl being overturned in court?
An outraged San Diego Yacht Club board rallied today to announce they will appeal the decision by the judge.
We strongly feel that the court should not have the power to overturn the results of a sporting event 7 months after it is over, or a week, or a day, or any time.
What bothers the yacht club so much is that the judge made 2 rulings before the race, including one that said the America's Cup deed cannot stop anyone from using a multi-hulled boat. To add insult to injury,
it's incomprehensible to us that a court would order the America's Cup be sent to a yacht club that has never won an America's Cup match.
The important answer, though, is that not only the America's Cup Organizing Committee, but now the San Diego Yacht Club will mount a strong challenge not on the water, but in the courts to the loss of the all-important cup. Lorraine Kimmel for CBS News, San Diego.
Finally, millions of baseball fans spend long winter months hungering for that first hot dog of the new season. But at San Diego's Jack Murphy Stadium, there's a new smell in the air. To some, it's only raw fish. But for baseball fans with a taste for trends, it's the very latest thing, ballpark sushi. Buy me some raw fish and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back.
Are you kidding?
Yes.
And that's the CBS Morning News for Tuesday, April 4th. I'm John Ferrugia in for Faith Daniel.
And I'm Charles Osgood. Stay with us at the top of the hour for CBS This Morning with Kathleen Sullivan and Harry Smith in Havana, reporting on the visit of Mikhail Gorbachev.
An historic meeting in Cuba. Mikhail Gorbachev visits Fidel Castro. The story and what it means from Dan Rather in Havana tonight on the CBS Evening News.
I'm Kathleen Sullivan.
And I'm Harry Smith. Coming up, the most powerful woman in Cuba talks about the Gorbachev visit.
Also, family split by the revolution, live from Havana on CBS This Morning.
This is CBS.